Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. 76 years after the Schuman Declaration helped launch the European project, Europe Day on May 9th is being marked and renewed focus on unity, security, and the future direction of the European Union. According to polling by Eurobarometer, data suggests that trust in the EU is rising, particularly in countries like Poland, even as the bloc grapples with war on its borders and debate over future enlargement. So what all this means on this day, we're joined by Piotr Maciej Kaczyński, EU Institutional Issues Lecturer, University of Warsaw. Good to have you with us.
Good morning.
So let's look at the history of all this a little bit right now. The EU has come out of this Schuman Declaration. It was created to secure peace. There's war on the continent right now. What does Europe Day mean today for Europeans in your mind?
Look, Europe has been created in response to war, after war, Second World War, the biggest trauma on the European continent ever. Only a couple of years, 1950 is only 5 years after the Second World War, when the prototype of the EU, today's EU, is created first time. So war is nothing new to the EU, and actually the very drama of a war is bringing the European solution much more realistic to anyone out there, because the EU has proven time and time again that only a stronger European cooperation between European nations that is effective is able to guarantee peace between the nations that are participating in it. So the big question, of course, is whether this bloc is going to be able to defend itself against the threats coming from outside. But to keep the long story short, security issues, war questions have been around the very notion of united Europe from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it has served very much, the bloc has served very much as an economic force, as avoiding war. That's changed a lot. We have new defense investments. Tell us a little bit more, because we've had quite a significant day in Warsaw on Friday. The SAFE loan was signed. Also, I think very much pioneered, led by Poland. Tell us a bit about what that means, not just for Poland, but for all of Europe.
So SAFE, of course, has been signed, and this is a massive investment into the Polish defense, but not only the Polish defense. So what is SAFE? SAFE, effectively, historically looking as well, is a return to the second original idea. So the first original idea that the Europeans have had those 76 years ago was to share power to the supranational level, and that was revolutionary at the very start. The second idea was to create a defense union. That idea has fallen in 1954, and then came only to kind of secondary fruition, this economic cooperation that we have developed since 1958. Now, defense, however, is coming back. So it's like a boomerang coming again at Europeans. And this time round, this is more serious than ever, because the threat has never been so serious and so dramatic and so close by.
Mm-hmm. And also, let's also talk a little bit more again about Schuman himself. I know that you're in Paris right now. Schuman himself, a foreign minister of France. If we look at 1950, that declaration, very much about tying together coal and steel. So tell us a bit about what you're seeing there in France. I mean, France has been a key member of the European Union. What are the people saying at this point? What's the mood like? How does France view the European project where you are?
So France actually is celebrating today and yesterday. France is one of very few countries in Europe that celebrates the 8th of May, the end of the Second World War, with a national holiday. From what I could gather, there are celebrations in a number of countries, but only 3 European Union member states are actually having a day off on 8th of May, and that is France, Czechia, and Slovakia. But today, on the 9th of May, there are major celebrations. The city of Paris and the presidency have been inviting people to participate in those celebrations on 9th of May. 9th of May is remembered, is celebrated, and this is a very good news. I saw that some pro-European organizations are doing quite a few of events all around Europe, but mostly in Germany and Italy, the two losers, if you like, in the Second World War for very good reasons, where the strength of nationalism is actually weaker than in some other countries. So the 9th of May and the remembrance of 1950 is actually very important. And there is a little distinction in most of Europe between 8th and 9th of May, because we know that the 9th of May in Eastern Europe tradition, especially the Soviet tradition, is remembered as the end of the Second World War. So here's a little discrepancy. But France remembers, but of course France has two major people from the 50s and 60s who have contributed to the European project, one positively by creating it, Schuman, and second, the main opposer of a supranational Europe at the time, Charles de Gaulle. And that other stream of ideas have dominated French politics ever since. And this Gaullist approach is sometimes blocking progress also on security matters. For example, I was in Berlin just a couple of days ago, and the Germans are very upset about the Franco-German non-cooperation on developing a new plane for the European defense. So the French have been stubborn and on some occasions very difficult partners to cooperate, even if President Macron has been vocally very supportive of furthering the project.
Mm-hmm. Well, with 27 member states, it can, I guess, sometimes be a bit difficult to agree. But on that note, also on the mood of the people, the citizens, let's also look at Poland for a moment. And generally, I mentioned that Eurobarometer poll that was released on Friday. Granted, that's one survey, but there it did seem that polls just the EU, 51% on average higher. Even if you look at others, 76% of that poll, actually 72% of polls say they're optimistic about the future of the EU. How do we square that? We've also seen very much anti-EU sentiment as well in Poland by certain parties across other parts of Europe. Where is the reality there? How does the EU confront that? How should the Polish government confront that?
Look, when it comes to the Polish population, the EU is effectively this very important notion that it has assisted Poland with its economic transition, with its economic miracle over the last 20 years, in particular since 2004, but also before that. And this is the strongest affiliation and association that the Polish public has with the European Union, and this is why it's supportive of it. Why polls could be a bit more optimistic right now is because events such as Hungarian elections are removing a Russian effectively espionage system from the EU, and it's a major progress in the sense of unity. So that gives a certain hope for the future. But it doesn't also mean that polls are hurrah optimistic about that project, because if you ask for specific questions about furthering the integration, so in general terms, polls are supportive of, for example, having more united foreign policy or more united defense. But however, when it comes to specifics and specific ideas and projects, we have seen that the false idea of President Nawrocki of save 0% was gaining traction, even though it was a hoax. It was not a realistic project at all. So you have this part of the population that is resisting further integration, even though in principle they are pro-EU.
Mm-hmm. All right, and also this goes to the nature of what the EU is. It's been changing. We mentioned from that declaration, just a few members association that now has become this massive international bloc of 27 member states, it's also been always expanding. And that's one of the things I want to ask you about. Looking at EU enlargement, that has always been, let's say, baked into this project. Where we are right now, if we're looking at still certain countries that want to get in, Moldova, for instance, Ukraine wants expedited membership. We're waiting on Western Balkans nations. Where are we with enlargement? And say, how realistic is that Ukraine will join, let's say, in an expedited fashion?
Yes, enlargement has been for a very long time a very important project, but sometimes negatively and sometimes positively. We remember that in the 60s, de Gaulle was blocking British enlargement for as long as he was president, and Britain with a few other countries could join on in the 70s. But since then, we have had a continuous process of enlarging until 2013, and then stop. Since 2014, EU itself said we will not enlarge further. We need to consume the previous enlargement. We need to consolidate on the internal side. And now we are in 2026 when that policy went through the roof, went through the window in 2022. Ukraine has opened the door for itself and for other countries to join, but we see that the door is open to that degree that the smallest nations can squeeze in, and that probably will be Montenegro very soon by 2028 is quite realistic. The drafting of the accession treaty of Montenegro has begun, so this is quite realistic. Now, when it comes to the biggest elephant in the room right now is Ukraine itself. This is a no-go to consider that Ukraine could join the Union by 2027. This is far too unrealistic. One should focus on the starting of real negotiations, because we have had informal contacts, informal negotiations with the Ukrainian side, but the formal stages of opening and closing those chapters, there are over 30 chapters, are there to be opened formally and closed formally before the accession can happen. And then you have this one gigantic issue. We will not be ready in Europe to accept a country that has a war within.
All right, so still massive achievement of 76 years since that declaration marked across the continent. Thanks for all those insights today, Piotr Maciej Kaczyński there from the University of Warsaw. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you for watching, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.